Hi everyone, welcome back to Java 1 for All. In this video, we are going to keep talking about reference variables, and now we are going to learn something new. I don't know if you noticed, but the reference variables, they are kind of remote controls. Every time we want to change something in the object, we have to call the reference variable dot the attribute, and then who is actually executing, the one that's storing, is the object. And we do that for all the references that we have so far. So basically, the reference variable, it is kind of remote control. It is a remote control, and the buttons, what you can use are the things that you have inside your class. In this case, name, gender, and age. So for example, when I have a reference variable that is a student, I'm telling, okay, this remote control can trigger name, can trigger gender, can trigger age, either to get the data or to assign data. So basically, imagine that you have a television and you have a television with Netflix. Now, if you have a remote control for that television, you probably have a button Netflix. Let's say that the TV is Sony. But let's say that you go to your friend's house, you take a remote control, and his Sony TV does not have that Netflix, but you still have the remote control with Netflix button. So even if you press, the object that's the TV will not do anything because it doesn't know about it. So it's the same principle here. We have the remote control that is the student, the type of this reference variable with these attributes, so what we can trigger, and then since the object is the same type as the reference variable, we can do the same thing. We can just use name, gender, and age. So basically, if the object is responsible for always executing and getting the data, it means that we could have a method here and we would have access to all these attributes. And this is what we are going to do now. Basically, we are going to give the responsibility to print to this object that is the student. Now let's go back to our code, and then we are going back to student inside introduction to methods, and I'm going to do exactly the same as we have here, the same print, but I'm going to write it down. Public void print, and I'm not going to ask for any attribute, any reference variable here. And why is that? Because I have access. Remember, the method that we have, it's going to be executed inside the object. So it's like I don't need another reference variable. Why? Because I have access to the variables that I have inside this object. And to have access to this, we just have to call with a special word that is this. And then dot, and as you can see, we have my attributes. And if I do the same as we did for the printer, so basically now I have another option in my remote control that is print, and I have another option in my object that is the print method. So when I call student01.print, the print that's going to be executed is this one, and then we are saying, hey, I would like to print whatever is inside, and then we are calling, for example, this.name. So basically this.name is having a reference to this name right here. And this, of course, is the same for all the objects that are student. So we have the same down here. Now let's go back and let's create a new test. Right click, Java class, student test 02. PSVM, press tab, and now I will copy just these lines, still creating the object. Now I don't need my printer, so basically we have the same structure as we have here, student01 and student02. Now I want to print the data, so basically I just have to call the reference variable, the remote control, and it will trigger the right object. So this means that I don't have to create another reference variable to keep the reference temporarily. I just call student01.print, and then student student02.print. And if I execute Ctrl Shift F10, we have the same result. So now, when I call student01.print, it's going to execute inside this object. This object will have access to all its attributes, and then once it finishes, it's going to call student02, and the same thing is going to happen here. So you can only call the, let's say, the functionality inside your object that's available in your remote control. So keep that in mind, because once we talk about polymorphism, it's going to change a little bit. So now, if I go back to my student, you take a look, we can also, and just for the sake of clarity, remove this keyword, and it will still work. If you press Shift F10 to execute the last class, we still have the same result. So if you do not have any local variable with the same name, you can skip this keyword, but the best practice is to add this keyword, because you are telling for everybody that reads this code, the lines 10, 11, and 12, they are getting the data directly from the class attributes. Now, another thing, remember that I spoke a couple videos ago about cohesion. Honestly, this is decreasing the cohesion a little bit, because now the student has two responsibilities. The first one is to represent a real, like, live student into our system, and the second one is to print this data. But if you think about the complexity of having like a printer for each object that you have in your system, you are going to have like thousands of classes that are basically printing. We could use some design patterns to avoid this problem, but having a method inside your object that's going to print the data, it's kind of identifying this object, what this object actually has inside, is not a bad practice. In fact, Java will do that for you, and once we learn inheritance, we are going to see how to do it. But basically, this is not a bad practice. Even though it's making the cohesion a little bit lower, actually it's a good thing to do. So for this class, what you have to remember is the object is always the one responsible for executing the functionalities, either just getting the data or storing the data, or triggering the method and executing. So the object is the one responsible for doing all of this. The reference variable is just kind of a trigger. Well, I think that's enough information for one video. I see you in the next one. Bye.